President Trump has to understand, and his Secretary of Commerce has to understand, that the trading relationship in terms of GDP may not be as great for the United States as it is for Canada, but it's an extraordinarily important relationship for the lumber industry, the house building industry, for the automotive sector, for all sort for the farming industry. It's all sorts of integration that has been threatened by what Trump has done over the last few months, and that Prime Minister Carney is trying to put back together a little bit. But as we know, you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together entirely.
That meeting in the Oval Office between President Trump and Mark Carney was surprisingly warm and courteous, though the Canadian Prime Minister made it clear he flatly rejects the US President's desire to make his country the 51st US state. Trump appeared keen to get along and lavished praise on Mr. Carney, but insisted he would never say never about the potential for a wonderful marriage to make Canada an American state. The newly re-elected Canadian leader made it plain that was not going to happen.
If I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace, that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
Well, Canada's also still keen to negotiate cuts to tariffs on trade between the two countries. Let's talk to Eddie Goldenberg. He was Chief of Staff and a Senior Policy Advisor to the former Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. Good evening to you, Eddie.
Good evening. It's very, very good to be with you.
Good to speak to you. What did you make of that meeting tonight?
Well, I thought it was an interesting meeting. I mean, yes, they were both courteous to each other. I think what was very important is that Prime Minister Carney was very clear, obviously, that Canada is not for sale. He was also very clear that the auto industry in North America is integrated. I don't think President Trump knows that. And he was very clear that it's important to get involved in a negotiation, but that we don't know where the negotiation is going to end up. And I think that he was, the Prime Minister demonstrated his integrity, and frankly, during the course of the Oval Office meeting,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Eddie, but we're very keen to hear what you're saying, and there seems to be a problem with the line at the moment. We're going to just see if we can establish a better line to you, because it'd be great to hear properly what you have to say on this. What was extraordinary is, of course, Mark Carney was elected after sending a very strong message to President Trump, vowing to fight against those trade tariffs, vowing that Canada would not give in to the US demands to make his country the 51st state of America. Those two differences between the two leaders still remain, but what was fascinating was to hear how each of them seemed to be very keen to express their cordiality, and in particular, President Trump saying that he wants to be friends with Canada, and he seemed to want to congratulate Mark Carney on the scale of his election. Well, we've got Eddie Goldenberg back. Tell us again what you made of that meeting, perhaps surprisingly cordial.
Well, I think it was cordial, but also the Prime Minister was very strong in the Canadian position. Obviously, we have no intention of ever becoming another state of the United States. Obviously, we need to renegotiate our trading relationship because the Americans have imposed tariffs that are contrary to our existing relationships. So yes, the Prime Minister wants to renegotiate. He wants to get involved in a proper negotiation, but he was very clear in his press conference that we don't know where it's going to end up.
They were
And
very diplomatic, weren't they? Both Mark Carney and Donald Trump, despite the fact that they flatly disagree on so much.
Well, I think they were diplomatic in the room, but I must say that there were a good part of that Oval Office meeting was President Trump on a rant about China and about all sorts of things that were totally irrelevant to that meeting. The Prime Minister's hope is that there can be a proper negotiation of a trading relationship that's going to be different from what we've had in the past, but that is still extraordinarily important to Canada. And as he said, we will know in the course of the negotiations whether the Americans can be trusted. I would say that on the the Soviet American relationship, President Reagan used to say, "Trust but verify," and I think that's where Canada is going to be in terms of dealing with Donald Trump.
What is the situation in terms of tariffs at the moment between the US and Canada? Because at one stage, President Trump announced huge tariffs on Canada, then those were rescinded. Then I think you're back to, 25% on cars and aluminium and 10% on everything else.
Yes, and 25% on steel as well. On cars, I think the problem that President Trump has is that he does not know that the industry, the North American automotive industry, has been totally integrated since about 1965. So that the tariffs he's trying to impose on Canadian cars are going to hurt the American industry. He's being told that by General Motors and by others, and he has to figure out what to do. He's not one who likes to backtrack, but sometimes he will backtrack. And what we have done as Canadians is we've put counter tariffs on cars coming in from the United States. It's not something that Canada wants. It's not something that's great for consumers, but we have to do that. And the hope is that a negotiation, probably with officials in the room where the temperature is reduced considerably, may lead to some result that will be beneficial to both sides. But I think that what Mr. Carney was very good at today was making very clear that we don't know that we hope the results of the negotiation will be very good, but we don't know, and we will have to do as Canadians what we can do best, and that will involve probably a new trading relationship with other countries in Europe and in Asia.
What is interesting is the importance of those relations between the US and Canada, because trade in cars and indeed many other products is very closely integrated. But you've now got the Canadian people, and we saw this, didn't we, during the election, a lot of anti-Trump sentiment in the country.
Well, Canadians were very hurt by this 51st state, and the result, a lot of Canadian tourism is down. Just anecdotally, people going to the grocery stores are looking to make sure they can buy products that are not from the United States, and that's not something that can last forever. And I think that that Trump has to learn that the American farmer depends on Canadian potash for fertilizer. The nuclear industry depends on Canadian uranium. Yes, they could buy them from uranium and potash from Russia, but that's not likely. And I think that President Trump has to understand, and his Secretary of Commerce has to understand, that the trading relationship in terms of GDP may not be as great for the United States as it is for Canada, but it's an extraordinarily important relationship for the lumber industry, the house building industry, for the automotive sector, for the farming industry. It's all sorts of integration that has been threatened by what Trump has done over the last few months, and that Prime Minister Carney is trying to put back together a little bit. But as we know, you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together entirely.
Eddie Goldenberg, former Chief of Staff and Senior Policy Advisor to the ex-Canadian Prime Minister Jean Chrétien.
Is it possible for me just to add, when I worked for Prime Minister Chrétien, we said no to the war in Iraq, and it didn't destroy our relationship with the United States.
That is an important point to make. Thanks for clarifying that. Good to speak to you. Thank you so much.